What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the 54 Chevy truck build that I have started. As you can hopefully you've watched my previous videos, but in those previous videos I haven't given much direction as to what I'm thinking about doing to this truck. I always said from the beginning that I want to try to keep this truck as original as possible. Unfortunately, what that means is it's not drivable really on the freeway. These trucks either came with a 390 or 410 rear end. This truck has the 390, I believe, but it has what you call a closed driveline, and what that means is that the drive shaft, transmission, rear end is what makes up that closed driveline and makes it to where it's very difficult to get lower gears to make this truck go more freeway speeds, and it also really limits how you can go about getting those freeway speeds. There used to be a company called Patrick's that sold 355 gears. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what they were. To try to help you get up there, to retain that closed drive line. But there is a solution that will give you a lot more options, and that is right here. So this rear end is from a 2004 Colorado, Chevy Colorado. It's slightly, little bit wider than the original rear end, but what I love about it, why I chose this particular one, is that it has 6 lugs in the same pattern as the original wheels. So it's important to me to reutilize the original wheels so I could retain the original look to the truck. The other thing that's going to help us get to those freeway speeds is by adding a overdrive transmission. Unfortunately, the 3 on the tree on the truck, there's not really an overdrive option for that. I mean, technically there is. There's guys online that have these electronic overdrive attachments to the back of the transmission and some stuff like that. But by far the easiest conversion to do is by utilizing this guy right here. And that is a T5 transmission out of a S10. So we will have to remove the original 3 on the tree or column shift transmission and install a T5 floor shift transmission. Luckily, it should bolt right up to the original truck bell housing, which means I can retain the foot pedal starter and make it a lot easier. The trickiest part, from what I've read online, is the input shaft. As you can see here, I have already started to take it apart, and I have a new one that I ordered off of eBay from a guy who does the input shaft conversion specifically for this swap. So we'll have to see if that's going to work. But now let's get started. We got to figure out how to lift up this truck in the back by not using the axles. So that means I'm going to have to try to find somewhere on the frame to lift it up, because ultimately I'm going to drop the rear axle. I think the rear end and the drive shaft, since it's a closed drive line, I'm going to have to probably remove them together, which is going to be kind of difficult because in order to remove the rear end from the drive line, I think you got to do something with the spider gears and disconnecting them and all that. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove it all in one piece and just roll it around. So with that being said, let's get rolling. So the first thing we're going to try to do here is remove the old spare. And this should be a bit of an interest to you because this tire is ancient. I have no idea how old this spare is on the back of this truck, but I can almost guarantee you it probably hasn't been touched in decades. But let's find out. Let's take it down. Ooh, man, look at this tire. Sucker is old. I don't even see a date plate on it, so it might be pre-DOT on this. You can see it used to have white wall, but man, this sucker is ancient. Alright, let's get these hubcaps off and start taking the tires off. So we have the truck on the jack stand, as you can see. Next thing we need to do is drop the rear of this rear end. So there's a few things we're gonna have to disconnect here. One of which being the leaf springs, because the axle is on top of them. The other thing is the brake lines. We're gonna have to release those. We have to get the rear shackle off of the leaf spring. And once we do that, all of this should drop. Obviously the shock has to come out as well. We're just kind of figuring this out as we go along here. It's not super complicated. That's one good thing about having a 54. Not a lot of complication going on. So you can see, got the drum brakes off. Here's what's left of them with some hardware. I won't be reusing this, so I wasn't too worried about tracking where stuff went, although I did take a couple of pictures. But the brakes are off, and thus I was able to remove the parking brake. So now we got to do the same thing to the other side, and then after that we will start taking off these shocks. Alright, the shocks are off. Now it is time to remove the brake lines. This is where you could potentially cause a mess if there's any kind of brake pressure in there. We're going to try to undo it from this bracket. This is where it distributes brakes from the passenger side and the driver side. So we're going to try to disconnect this. This looks very crusty. Very crusty. So we're going to need to be very careful removing these, and hopefully we don't strip anything. So as you can see, we pretty much ruined this brake line. It's pretty ancient anyways, so it was probably due to be replaced. But if I ever had to use this rear end, I'd have to figure out how to reuse that fitting or make it work. So we got it disconnected, and the last thing really holding this rear end up is the leaf spring. So as you can see, I've already started. I've taken one grease fitting off here. I'm going to take the top one off and remove that center bolt. And should get us the rear of the shackle. I need to support the rear end though before I do this, because it's going to want to drop, and I'm probably going to need a little bit of weight off of the leaf spring just to safely get the leaf spring disconnected without the weight of the rear end coming down on it. So let me get some support via a jack underneath the pumpkin of the rear end, which is that center section right there, and get some up pressure on it, and we can start taking the shackles off. So the rear end is released. There's nothing really holding it anymore. Also, this is something I'm going to get rid of too. These are freaking glass packs. What do they call them? Something bombs on a dadgum 54 Chevy. That's just stupid. So I'm going to get rid of that eventually. After probably all this, I'll probably redo the exhaust. Probably go back to single exhaust. I want it to sound like it originally did. A tractor, basically. Anyway, so the rear end is loose. And now we got to undo these 4 bolts that attach the drive shaft to the transmission. I'm going to go ahead and probably drain the transmission at this point. Interesting to note, it looks like it's been leaking itself empty. So anyways, let's get this transmission drained, and then we will start taking out these bolts. So it looks like this is just a cap I got all 4 bolts out, and that looks like a ball. That must be where it gets its angle, and I'm assuming that there's some kind of sleeve that has teeth up in there, and that's how it works. And this is your seal. See, there's a gasket here, this closed drive line, and all that's going away because we're going to an open drive line. And man, this transmission is tiny. Might be the smallest transmission I've ever seen. Anyways, so let's lower the rear end and see if this starts to come out of there. We're going to leave the pan here in case more liquid comes out. So here is the original rear end out of the truck. Here's the one that's going in. I can tell by eyeballing it they're going to be pretty close, but everything I've done so far is based off of research, not actually being able to measure it. So let's make sure this works. So I will go from the outside of the drum over to the outside of this drum. And it is about 62. Let's measure this new one. And this new one's about a little over 60, almost 61. So that's gonna work. Alright, something else we're going to measure is bolt pattern. So this is gonna be a little shy of 6 inches, looks like 5 3/4. Let's measure this rear end. And 5 3/4, same wheel pattern. So we should be able to use the original wheels on this new rear end. Alright guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. The next one we'll be trying to weld the new purchase and installing the new rear end in this truck. And then maybe episode after that we'll start working on the transmission part of it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're doing the same project like I am, hopefully it helped you. And remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel to continue the journey on this old 54 Chevy truck. Bye.